Meeting of the Woodland Planning Commission to order at 7 p.m. If you silence your cell phones, please, let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. The role of the Planning Commission is to hold workshops to review and make recommendations to the City Council on all manner of policy and legislative activities. Sometimes we act as a quasi-judicial board, but not tonight. Janice, would you call the roll?
Yes. Brian Mattson.
Present.
Kim Blaufus.
Here.
Michael Benjamin.
Here.
Tel Jensen.
Here.
Tiffany Whitten.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. A full roster tonight. Let's see. Let's start with citizen communications for items not on the agenda. I got one here. Mr. Bob Nelson.
There you go.
Come on up.
Last time I just saw two of you.
Yeah. Well, we're here again.
I'm just giving everybody a bad
All right.
time.
We
Sorry
need
about that.
your-
I'm getting off on the wrong foot.
We need your name and address, and then we'll get going. Yeah. Yeah. Have they gone?
There you go.
I think three of you four, or maybe four, we spoke with maybe 6 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago, and the primary issue was with RV resorts, RV parks in particular, is that the code that's on the books is 29 days a year. And that's not unusual, because that's in every jurisdiction, in probably most every county, and for some reason, for 40 years in this country.
As I remember, that's on purpose to because of tenant law? Is that correct?
No, not necessarily.
Maybe I might misunderstand.
No, not necessarily. It's really, they've kind of lumped tents and RVs and tiny homes and all in one category, where Creed, Colorado tried to separate those out. So I did do a text amendment and went through the process and submitted that. Creed had developed some great boilerplate that I was able to utilize and present where it did segment out tents and trailers into one category and RVs and tiny homes into another. As a tiny home is an RV, it is a licensed vehicle. Where do tiny homes stay when they're on the road? They stay in RV parks, RV resorts. What we're doing here, we have 18 acres under contract right here at Dyke Road exit 22. Walmart, we're right here. This is a culmination of an effort of the last year and a half, and it's coming to the head very well, if you will. I'm pretty excited about the design. It has its own mile hiking trail around it. That trail could be expanded to a public access, possibly off of our turnaround, which then Travis just indicated that there's a major trailhead coming down from the north that'll come down into Green Mountain Road, which we do have access on here. So that will be one of the attractions of the park, if you will, resort. It's very difficult to get these financed with the bank. Okay, they treat them like motels, and that's why you don't see any new RV parks built in the Northwest in the last 10 years. The consultants couldn't find them. And the reality of the whole thing is baby boomers are downsizing. Tiny home legislation has passed the state of Washington where you can have tiny home communities and have tiny homes treated as permanent occupancies. So given that, we have phase one, phase two. Phase two, you see to the latter part there, we're going to hold off on that till possibly next year, where maybe some overall comp plan changes might come into play where we can have permanent tiny home community, maybe 50 sites. I've coined the term, in there you have some of the code that I developed, what I termed the alternative living community, where you're combining the old with the young. But baby boomers are, they're liquidating their houses, they're getting in an RV, they want to travel, but they still need a place to come back and call home. So they'll be on the road maybe, 9, 10 months, they'll be home and on the road for 2, 3, 4 months or whatever. but it becomes still one of the least inexpensive ways to live after you've acquired your RV, which have to be newer than 10 years old, then so forth. The pad rental is not that big of an item. In our last go-around, you all were gracious enough to extend 29 days to 90 consecutive days. Ideally, what we need is 90 consecutive days with 1 day off and the ability to come back. And that's what the RV resort in Wilsonville is doing. And what it would provide for us is the ability to monitor the park. If we have bad apples, they don't get to come back to their pad. Okay, so it's a way for us to police it. And the reality of it is, most of these RVs, if you're going to spend 100 plus on an RV, you're going to spend 2, 3, 4 months on the road. I don't know what part of the year it is or whatever, but I suspect it's going to be our winter time, and they'll be out and about. So 30%, I guess that wasn't emphasized enough in our discussion, or maybe the commercial wasn't enough, because 30 to 40% of the park is actually overnight. Summertime will be 100% full. Most of that will be, half of it will be overnight stuff, with the appropriate room taxes and all that stuff going on.
Hey, Bob?
Yes.
I don't mean to interrupt, but
No,
I
that's
just want to
fine.
ask questions as they come up. 'cause I'll
No,
forget
that's
it.
great. Perfect, Brian.
You were saying that last time we had recommended to increase it to 90 days.
Right.
Why do you need something from us? If it's your park, can't you install your own policy that you have to leave for a day and then come back? Do you need us to legislate that?
Well,
or to
the
recommend
tail end, you left a tail end in the code.
that? Did I miss it off?
You did. No, everybody else, I was joking, Brian, I couldn't resist. No, basically, if I just had the tail end of that sentence crossed off, I'm a happy guy. I will build out a resort, it won't be an RV park. And that's why you have,
Our code change says 90 days in a year.
Oh, in the year.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And that's
I
where
got
we-
you. I don't remember.
yeah, that's where we fell short. I felt last time that we didn't
I got
explain
you.
our position well enough, and I didn't want to step on anybody's toes, and I wasn't controlling the session, so, but ideally, we can have a very, very nice addition to the community. I mean, you can see the pictures. Our park is being modeled after the pictures you see there. That's the Crown Villa Resort, albeit it's not 5,000 square feet, but we're half of that, actually, if you think about it, because our pads are the same 23 feet wide and 65 feet deep, and so they're perpendicular to the roadway, most of the long term. With the overnights, you've got to allow people an angle, there's narrow, they go in and come back out.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Don't most of the RV parks around Washington, they're 90 days, you have to leave for 1 day and then you can come back?
Nobody's enforcing the code. Even in our pre-app, they set it on the table and said,
Okay,
we don't support.
I think I might be confused because our code right now says 90 days and you have to leave for the rest of the year. But I thought at the other RV parks, maybe they don't enforce it, but it's like 90 days and you have to leave for a day and then you can come back.
No.
Please
That's
remember
what I
to
want.
mic up.
Pardon me?
Please mic up. The recording.
I'm sorry.
Recording doesn't pick up.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
And so that
No.
was a 5-minute alarm as well.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Well, I would like, that's what I'd like it to be. Okay, right now, it's 90 contiguous days a year. And that just went through our process here. The other parks in the area, in our pre-app, they indicated it's not being enforced.
On your phase 2 for the tiny homes?
Yeah.
Those are going to
Yes.
be removed every 90 days?
No.
No, so these
Those by
would be like multifamily housing then?
So they
Basically,
fall
it'd be
under-
apartments, kind
A-
of type of thing?
ADUs, whatever you all come up with in your concert, you need affordable housing, okay? And you have a state law now that enables that in any zone, where you can have these tiny home communities signed by the governor 4 months ago.
You had stated earlier that at least the RV portion, you said that they had to be newer than 10 years, probably a standard
That is standard.
park thing that
Right.
we wouldn't
No.
enforce something like that.
No, that's us.
But would that apply to your tiny homes also?
That's an,
That's a good question. They are RVs, but they have to go through a certificate of occupancy, okay?
No, I don't know.
I'm not sure that they have the same scrutiny as RVs, because you're dealing with, I think, probably better building materials. But they do it every 6 months. I'm not sure that they have to have certificate of occupancy and so forth. So they're fully checked out and vetted. And those, we have to be fairly careful, because once you say you have a tiny home site, you get people coming from everywhere that built their own, and those are all certified units that would have,
Have to be HUD certified, right?
well, there's actually industry certifications for tiny homes that they have to adhere to. So I think,
All right.
am I out of time?
Yeah, you're out of time.
Okay.
Long out of time. But that's all right. Yeah, we appreciate you coming, and
Thank you.
This'll
Appreciate
be-
consideration. We would appreciate just scratching out that last part of the sentence.
sure, yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Question? So the code got changed where
Make
it
sure
says...
you're talking to Mike.
Code got changed where it says no more than 30 days, and so now it's been changed to 90. This still says 30 days.
Yes.
We did change that code?
We did.
Okay, all right.
To 90 days in 1 year. 90 consecutive days maximum in 1 year.
Did we also take out the part that they can't come back after 1 day?
No.
Must be moved off-site for 1 day or so and moved back in thereafter.
No, it says, let's see.
Right here.
In the original
The
code, it said
standards shall
something
not
like
come
that they're not meant to leave for a couple days and come back, but it was pretty vague.
So it also says consecutive days. And so once you're in, that consecutive time starts, or if okay.
Yeah, that's pretty,
Yeah, that's good.
that still needs some work.
It's not clear, but, okay.
Yeah.
And I think if we're interested, we could put it in our miscellaneous batch coming up. You know, how we did the miscellaneous batch
Yeah.
before for retooling our code. Perhaps we could just revisit it in a batch of codes and change that wording. We could talk more about it at an upcoming hearing.
And I think we might get into this with one of the items that we're going to talk about later, because our retooling our code, we talked about accessory dwelling units, and I have an update for you, so
All right.
probably talk about this.
I look forward to that.
Okay.
All right. I don't see anyone else out there. You're the only one, Bob, so I don't think we can move on to approving the agenda.
Move we approve the agenda.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to approve the agenda. Any discussion about that? Anyone opposed? Okay. Next up is approving minutes from our December meeting. Could I get a motion to approve those?
I'll move to approve those.
Second it.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Have any discussion about that? I think they're great. I think these minutes are fantastic.
I do.
Let's take a vote then. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Okay. Minutes have been approved. Moving on, first up is discussion of self-service storage facility zone text amendment, ZTA-19-009. What have you got for us, Melissa?
So tonight we'll have a workshop on the storage facilities, and I'd like to start with a recap of the moratorium. It's been a little while since we've discussed this. So Council asked for a moratorium on new storage facilities, and the moratorium is 6 months. It's temporary. It started on December 2nd. It will expire on June 2nd. And why? So what Council was concerned about is that storage facilities do not have efficient use of our economic land, and they have few jobs per acre. they generate little utility revenue and just generally a low economic driver. They don't seem to drive other business around them. And there's concern about possibility for misuse, maybe people setting up a shop in a mini storage site, or maybe storing hazardous materials there are among some of the concerns. And there's also been several new applications on the horizon for mini storage in the area. So council asked us to have a moratorium, and just to recap further back, moratoriums, they're an authority granted by the state, and the state allows us to immediately stop one kind of development for a temporary amount of time. You have to hold a hearing to have findings of fact, to say that there is a reason to have that moratorium. And then it's a tool. It allows us, the Planning Commission, to have some time to think about what future code might be, and it stops all of the applications from flooding in while we're discussing making code changes. We can just take a breather and think about what better code might be. And then after the moratorium's lifted, we can have new standards in place that might better allow mini storage in woodland that is more aligned with our comprehensive plan. So during the moratorium, January and February, that was time for us to research. Tonight is the workshop where we can have discussion without having to strictly adhere to Robert's Rules of Order. We can just kind of have a free-flowing conversation after this and talk about what new code might be, what more research that you'd like, what do you want to see in the staff report next month when we have a hearing, and that's when we can adopt new code. Then City Council will hear our recommendation that we formulate at the hearing next month, and they'll have their first and second readings likely in May, and that will be in time to adopt new code in June. So tonight's workshop, again, we can review some of the storage data that Travis presented at the previous hearing, and we can discuss what the pre-moratorium standards were. We can examine some of the codes that were adopted by our neighboring jurisdictions, Vancouver and Ridgefield. And we could, well, if the public had been here, we would get feedback tonight, but we'll also get more feedback. I suspect a lot of people will come when we publish that we're having a public hearing, so we'll get more feedback then and consider our post-moratorium strategy. And you have an opportunity to give me some marching orders. What exactly do you want to see? If there's research that I haven't yet addressed, we'll have time to talk about it at the next meeting. Okay, so reviewing the storage data, we have found that it is average in the storage industry that 2.5 to 5 acres per project is typical, and there's usually about 3.5 jobs per facility. That gives us 1 job per acre. Now in our comp plan, we have some goals, number of jobs per acre. In commercial, we're aiming for 20 jobs per acre, and industrial, we're aiming for just 4 jobs per acre. And so 1 job per acre, that really brings down that average, right? It's quite low. So we have found here 6 facilities in the city already for storage. We've got 6,000 residents. We've got 1 new approved project. We've got 1 expansion that's already approved, and we have 1 that's in the permitting process. That was a pre-application, and City Council said it was important for us to consider that one vested, and it is. So that one's going through the process under all of the old rules. Cowlitz County, very close to our border, there's about 5 more facilities that are available.
And Melissa, sorry, can you back up one? Okay, sorry, thank you.
Okay. All right, so here is our zoning map, and this turned out pretty small on here, but oh, this isn't as easy to see as I had hoped, so I apologize. But here, so these thick outlines here, these are storage facilities already in town, and so you can't quite see the color differentiation. So I'll just have to point out that these 3 in the middle, these are existing facilities. Here, this is an existing facility, the Burrs Creek, and there's an expansion proved just to the north of it. And there are proposals here. This is the one that's a pre-application that will be developed. And
There is one approved for Belmont Loop, and there's another inquiry about Belmont Loop, another, not yet a proposal, but somebody's looking at putting a storage facility up there. Most of these are in the industrial area currently, and there's that one proposal up there in our highway commercial zone. And then nearby, we've got one in the bottoms. We have one right up here that's practically in the city, but it's in our urban growth boundary, but outside city limits, and then another one right up here.
Melissa?
Yes.
Is Belmont, I should know this, I apologize. Is Belmont Loop commercial or industrial?
Highway commercial, C2.
And that's an approved use in the highway commercial storage units?
Currently, yes. All right, so reviewing market saturation, it's considered 8 to 10 square feet per resident is considered saturated. If you have that much space available for people to use for storage, that's considered at saturation. And here within city limits, existing, we already have 17, almost 18 square feet per person. So we're almost double already. But there's more approved coming down the pipeline, so that would give us 32 square feet. And if you include Cowlitz County, you saw that there's some very nearby that gets up to 63 square feet per person in the city. And then if you count all the RV storage, you're almost up to 80 square feet per person, so maybe 8 times what industry standards considered saturated. So there's plenty of available storage for everybody in the city. Here's what our code says today. In the C1 zone, that is the commercial zone that's right around downtown, it's prohibited. In C2, it's permitted for household goods only, and then there's a caveat that you can have a resident watchman live there. In industrial, both heavy and light, it's permitted, and we don't have any specific design standards adopted for mini storage currently. So our neighbors had moratoriums recently and then adopted new code. Ridgefield did a pretty interesting take. I haven't seen another city do this, but they will only accept new storage applications if there's less than 8.32 square feet of self-storage for each person in city limits. And we're at 80 square feet right now. So they found that they were similarly saturated. That one's interesting. So that would mean anytime that we get an application, staff would then have to run this calculation and figure out if it was time to accept new ones. But it kind of allows you to have a rolling metric, I guess. They're considered a conditional use. They go to a hearing examiner now. They have more design standards. They require interior doors only, so you can't have exterior doors or those separate units that are all spread out. And they don't allow them visible from I-5 or on arterials. So then what Vancouver chose to change is they do allow them, but not on major corridors. And they're working to have like walkable commercial districts, and so that's why they've decided to exclude them from a lot of the corridors there. Interior access only. They asked for them to be at least 2 stories tall and have 15% glass, just for architectural interest.
Melissa?
Yes.
That major corridors, is that something that they define themselves? It's not like an arterial where it has an industry definition, or is a major corridor an industry term I'm just not aware of? It's
a term that they're using for their, I think it's for their 20-minute neighborhoods. They have goals specific for each of these corridors.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
So they're defined.
I guess maybe like an overlay zone, sort of.
It's defined within their own.
Yes.
I want to say it's the
and comp plan and
corridors.
Okay.
All right, so what is the impact of their codes? They have, both cities used codes that encouraged compact development. So interior access, that makes you put all the storage into one building and have an interior access door, making it 2 stories. It makes it all compact. So then that gives you a more favorable jobs per acre ratio. If you take that huge, sprawling mini storage site and condense it down. So you still have 3.5 jobs for the project, but now it's this big instead of that big.
Melissa,
Yes.
can I ask you a question?
Sure.
This doesn't include like RV storage or anything in Vancouver?
They did not address RV storage
Okay.
in theirs. Okay. That I know, is that right?
I didn't see anything on it, and my guess is it's just a market factor because the land is too valuable, even for RV
So
storage.
it'd be too expensive for
Yeah.
them to do anything.
So I think it's a market factor for them.
I was thinking that'd be a good discussion point for us if we want to consider RV storage and mini storage separately. That's for us to talk about. Let's see, and then their codes it makes for less new storage projects overall, so that can also help with the jobs per acre factor and decrease market saturation. And excluding from the commercial corridors in certain districts, that was the tool that Vancouver was using to help make more walkable, vibrant districts, more people on the street, encourage more commercial opportunity that people might want to stop in and out of and just visit throughout the day, coffee and that kind of thing. Okay, so traditional storage site, this is one from Woodland in the center of our town. Again, that sprawling design that I was describing. And here's a newer one that comes out of Portland. This would use the interior access that I'm describing. This is multi-story, like what I'm describing, more architectural interest and more glass. So got a more compact design and something that might be more desirable, especially in a commercial area.
Can I ask one more question?
Sure.
Do they have internal living residents in those?
Not that I'm aware, and that just seems strange in our code, honestly. Have you heard of that before?
It used to be an industry standard where you'd have one person that
Oh.
lived there and looked out for it, but that's long gone. They just have keypad entries now.
Oh.
Most of the ones that I see are all keypad entry. There's no jobs.
20 all over the
I see.
Vancouver area, and he does have a house to the front of all of his projects that then go on that is a resident manager for.
The one we used in Kirkland had a resident manager on it,
But that's old school, this is kind of what.
and it looked like that.
everybody's evolving to.
Or
So
in Kirkland.
it was a separate house, though?
No, it was inside the bottom floor
Okay.
of that facility.
Well,
It was an
And-
apartment down there.
And actually, the industry is now actually moving towards nobody actually at the site, so you get a code, you rent it over the internet, you get a code, you go in, you put your stuff away, there's nobody on site. And the other new thing that really is kind of outside where jurisdictions are prepared for is storage containers, where you can go up to Chehalis and buy a storage container and park it on their lot, and they'll stack them on top of each other for you, and whatever you put in your storage container gets delivered and it's stored on site. So in those cases, there's not actually any value to the community because there's not even a tax base because the property there's no structure. So no structure, no utilities, no jobs.
I've looked
Nothing
at,
but storage containers.
I just want to add, I've looked at 4 in the last 3 years at Clark County through reviewing them, and none of them had a caretaker
Yeah.
about it all. It's all unmanned keypad now. Just what I've seen.
no, Iron Days, those were built a long time ago.
All right, so I'd like you to think about what would you like to see more of, more research or more comparisons in the staff report for the hearing in March. And are you leaning toward any code tools, like maybe removing mini storage from permitted uses in all zones, or maybe adding it to the conditional uses in some of the zones? Maybe compact design was appealing to you. Limiting it in certain zones, maybe it's industrial only, maybe in commercial. Did the design standards speak to you? General employment density requirement, Telly, you brought that idea at one of our last meetings. Maybe there's mixed use on the ground floor. Maybe a building like this could have other uses in it, coffee or a mix of businesses. Maybe we try like Ridgefield and use a square foot of storage per resident metric, or maybe nothing. Maybe it's just back to pre-moratorium. Maybe we talk about this and decide that mini storage isn't an issue in the city.
You know, I have a question.
Sure.
Most of the land around Woodland is sand, and I'm wondering, just looking at those large storage buildings with glass, has there been any research looked at to see if we can even support that kind of structure on our land?
Multi-story buildings?
I know we were having some problems with the library when they were looking at it, just because they couldn't find granite. They went down 25 feet and they couldn't find granite.
There are certainly ways to engineer that. You just
Melissa, can you go back to that other
grab
screen? I just wanted to jot down some of the other.
Sure.
real quick.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I can look into that. I'd have to do some more research, but yeah, thank you.
And that actually would be an individual design decision, because they wouldn't know that until they get their building permit, and their architect is going to tell them whether they need engineered pilings or foundations.
So you think there are some things?
So there are limitations, and the property owner has to solve that as they ask for building permits. Like, for example, Columbia River Carbonates, they had to pile, or had to drill or punch in a bunch of pilings, and next door they're looking at a building that wouldn't require any pilings, it's just a foundation. So-
It's my understanding that, site conditions, that's going to be a factor regardless of what use is on the property. That's just part of your structural review, and your geotech has to look at your footings and that stuff, so.
But I think, Kim, you're wondering if there's a general, like if all the land, just general geology that's affecting all the sites.
Because, like in Clark County, you have everybody's land identified by some sort of geological.
Battlegrounds covered with clay and wetlands,
Yeah.
and their septic tanks don't work in certain areas. Yes,
Yeah.
there are,
That's
geological
what I was
factors.
kind of curious about. Thank
Okay,
you.
I'll put some thought into it. Thank you. Let's see. Recap on next steps. We'll have the hearing next month. The city council will review it in May. Moratorium ends on June. And so we can recommend that we'll replace it with new code, or we could actually recommend extending the moratorium if we wish, or just end it.
extending moratoriums, is that for any, is there a minimum or maximum on that?
So
6
there
months.
is actually a public hearing at the city council to discuss the moratorium that was passed, and it can only be good for 6 months, and if they extend it for another 6 months, they have to have another hearing to justify
Could you ex-
why.
Could you
the
extend it for
moratorium
1
is in
month,
place.
for example?
What's that?
Could you extend it for 1 month, for example?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
But you'd still
So
have to have
six months
another
is the
hearing.
max.
Maximum of 6 months, yep. And like our moratorium on marijuana sales, that was in place for like 3 years. 'Cause
They just kept
renewing it.
having a hearing to to extend it? or
To extend
renew
it.
All right, well, thank you for putting all this together, Melissa. I think it was a lot of material and pretty helpful.
Okay, good, thank you.
Got some good examples to draw from. So, let's do a workshop. Anybody have any initial thoughts on this?
I keep going over the fact that it produces little to no jobs per acre. The 3.5 jobs per facility, I think, might be dated, just because, I might be biased in the ones that I've looked at recently, but they're all unmanned. They're just keypads. This tends to be a source of problems with the neighbors also, because if nobody's around, nobody mellows out somebody that is doing something they shouldn't be, right?
Sleeping in it.
Could be, but if, you know what I mean?
Playing loud music while they're at their facility.
Yes, because we need to pass more ordinances against loud music. No. I think that's
Well, I think
gonna-
that we'd benefit if we put area zones in there that, like, they aren't permitted in.
Well, there's a lot of zones they're not permitted in right now. I think the issue is the fact that they're still permitted in a couple. And, I have no reason to doubt the research that staff has done, but we're extremely oversaturated now. What benefit does it give us to use, somewhat precious industrial land that's supposed to be creating jobs for something that isn't going to achieve that goal? Now, I sympathize with homeowners that plan to do this that don't have anything in the pipeline yet, but.
I do like that Ridgefield, thing where they said the average is 8 to 10, and when we drop below that, we can put in more storage, which apparently the Woodland would be never. I do think that makes sense.
One of the things, I feel like I'm all negative on storage units, but one of the things also I want to be cognizant of, if you allow a piece of property to be at least partially occupied by storage, it won't be redeveloped by anything else. It's not a temporary use, it's there. And so there's an opportunity cost maybe of an investor that we might lose because maybe the land is too scarce or too valuable, or we don't have enough industrial land to attract, what we truly want for those job-bearing, or at least those living wage jobs that we're trying to chase.
See, Brian, you see, like, if they put in storage, that's just what it is. No one ever retools a property.
I mean, if somebody's going to put that much money into it, they're not going to bulldoze it over. And if they want to sell it to somebody else, it's going to be way more value than it would be if it was flat land.
That's true.
Right, I mean, it's just.
Have we looked into how full our storage units that we have currently are? Are they full? They're full.
It's always time to do that.
I don't think we'd have so many inquiries to build them if they weren't going to be billable fairly quickly, right?
But if the growth, but however we're trying to manage growth, is looking for jobs in the commercial space in the hopes that if we develop residential, that we can match it in the commercial and industrial, I think that's where we have to look. And if the plan is, the comprehensive plan is for 20 jobs per acre, is that?
For commercial,
20
yes.
jobs per acre and commercial? I think we're just not helping ourselves any at all. Especially if we have more than what might be considered normal anyway.
So the vacancy information that the city of Vancouver discussed, they gathered and discussed at their hearing was the industry average is 10.3%. And the anecdotal, when they were having their discussions with the Planning Commission, is it was 100% full in 2016. And then they had a building boom, and it's currently at 83% vacancy. So
83% full. It's
80, yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
Right.
full.
Gotcha.
So currently,
Yeah.
they aren't really full. They have vacancies.
Because they had a boom.
Yeah.
Only their boom was so big, they put a moratorium on because it seemed like they were at or past saturation, and that's why the vacancy was so high. So
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay.
Your first metric you said is 10%. Was that 10% vacancy or 10% occupied?
10% vacancy.
Okay, so
across the
90%
industry.
occupied is the standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they started out at 100, and then after their housing boom, they went down to 83% occupied.
Not a
So-
housing boom, a
Storage unit
Storage
building
unit.
boom.
Storage
Oh,
unit.
is the storage
Everybody
unit
does
building?
build storage units. One of the biggest
So-
concerns now is that there's too many. If one locates right next to you, instead of having that be stabilized in 3 years, it can take the investor 5 years. It has that effect on one if they're located too close to one another.
All right.
Certain jurisdictions are saying it can't be within 3 miles of certain financial institutions are saying they won't loan on it if it's too crowded.
So I guess, my concern is, I don't feel like it's necessarily our role to pick winners and losers as far as particular businesses. So I mentioned this in previous meetings as well. It does not feel appropriate to me to, regulate one particular industry on the basis of job creation versus just saying we need to apply this standard to any business that comes to town. So, just on those grounds, I have a hard time saying, if we're going to start restricting uses, I have a hard time saying we should just restrict storage units. Does that make sense? Because that's definitely not the only potential business that does not meet our job creation standard. And it also, despite not creating a lot of jobs, if people are still building these things and it's hard to find space, that means there's demand for these. And whether or not it's coming from within the city of Woodland or not, we still make, and I'm not totally clear on what kind of tax revenue we get from these. We definitely get, B&O taxes, yeah? Does the city get tax revenue from,
So,
Doesn't B&O go to the state?
yeah,
Wanna give us
so
any
I
back?
don't know, because we get tax revenue, property tax revenue, and we get sales tax revenue, but I think this is a service. So I don't know whether that's considered part of the sales tax or not. I
Some
don't
of the
know.
services are.
I would be
considered
interested to know that. I would be,
part of sales.
if you could look into what kind of
Revenue.
tax revenue we actually get from these.
Yeah,
That would,
Service is different, and I think some of it comes back, it goes to the state, and then some of it comes back to us, I think.
okay.
But, and it might be rental rather than service also. I'm not sure till that I agree. I think, and here's the thing in my mind. From everything that I've heard so far, if other areas all around us are concerned about how many storage units are going in down there, and so they limit that. You come up here and it's open game, we could fill up our whole community out there in the commercial area because it's not filling up very fast anyway. If we fill them all up with storage units, then we end up not having any space for the other things that we'd like to have come to town.
Yeah, no, I think you're right, and I am very much in favor of, changing our zoning to address this. I think, having, at the very least, some design standards, particularly in commercial zones, if not restricting them to industrial zones completely. I think we do need to do something.
Yeah, it seems like if you have a piece of commercial property and you don't have a whole lot going on with what you're going to do something commercial, start up a business, it's easy to build storage units because everybody will flock to it. And so it's inexpensive and an easy choice to make, I think, is the key.
So on that note, I feel like, if we do say, in commercial zones, for instance, if we say, I believe Vancouver did, where they say, ground floor has to be a more traditional commercial use, and you can put storage on, second and floor and above. I think that potentially makes sense, because then, if storage is a sure thing, maybe that's what makes a commercial development pencil out, and we get more, human scale stuff out of the deal. So, I think we can, if we're smart about this, I think we can get what we want. Yeah, we can, we can conserve the land, because that's real, that's important, but, we can't, we can do that while not saying we don't want this business that is clearly a viable business to come to town.
I think that your idea of allowing it as part of a mixed use with other things is entirely more palatable. But I wanted to touch base. You said I don't want to pick winners and losers and exclude a business, and I'm sensitive to that. I don't want to restrict people's property rights any more than we should. But our role as the Planning Commission is to plan for areas where we're going to pick winners and losers, right? Plan areas where we want a certain business and areas where we don't. And that is kind of our role, to make those recommendations, to be,
I think it can be, and I think, in that discussion, I would actually probably fall more on the side of not choosing particular uses, but choosing, particular forms. Because, if it's a storage unit and it looks like Carnegie Hall, I don't care that it's a storage unit, right? If it's a beautiful building that makes me want to walk by it and be in that neighborhood, then, unless you're doing something really dastardly inside, I'm not sure that matters to me.
well, it can be beautiful, but if it has no economic benefit, it still
Yes.
doesn't have any
No,
economic benefit,
yeah, I'm
right?
sensitive
I
to
mean,
that as well, yes. Yeah, so I guess.
But I think it's a good idea that, allowing it as part of a mixed use, a part of something else with it. I think that's entirely more palatable, but I think I still feel the same way as far as storage units by themselves, or as currently allowed, is not a good use of our industrial property.
Can we, could we just say you need to employ 4 people an acre to do something? Is that legal?
I'm not sure we could regulate that through zoning, because that's not a land use.
Okay, could we say that they have to be, they have to be manned, there has to be a person there?
Again, I'm not sure that's a land use issue.
Okay.
And I don't know how you verify that over the long term either. I mean, okay, so if you don't, then is that a reason, if so if it's a condition of approval that it has to remain a manned facility, hence at least creating one job, or just a free rent for somebody, or whatever, how do you verify that they're getting paid a wage? How do you track that? And then if they're not there or they move out, do we revoke their permit? How do we do that? The building's already built, right?
Well, I
I
mean,
don't
we
think
have,
it makes it-
we have mechanisms for code enforcement
kinda
that are
like-
so effective.
It's kind of like our owner-occupied ADU standard,
Sure.
and there's no way of guaranteeing when they sell that property and they retire to Arizona that the future buyer
We're gonna
is
get to
going
that
to
tonight.
own.
So, one more thing before I forget. Looking at Ridgefield's code, I am struck by the number of different zones they have, and also wonder why we don't have any waterfront zones. That seems like we should have a waterfront zone. We got a nice river too. I think it's just as nice as Ridgefield,
Yeah.
but we have no waterfront mixed use or waterfront, anyway, that's a different discussion, but something to think about.
Thinking of other businesses that fall into the same category.
Well, we didn't hear you, Kim, sorry.
I'm sorry. What did you think of as other businesses that fall into the same category?
I don't know that any actually come to mind, and there may not be that many. But I could see, like a big old parking lot, or a equipment storage, or a largely unmanned warehouse that, any number of things that that haven't shown up yet, but certainly could.
One of the things that strikes me is, so I'm a big property use, I really support property rights, but with government, the goal is to potentially set an area up for the long term. And in that sense, you want to ensure that you have the best economic base that you can with the limited resources that you can. I think if I understand you, if we're going to, because they did put together this whole growth management plan that said we want this many jobs per acre, and it seems like it would be beneficial to support that. But it seems like if we would do something like this, then that means everybody that falls into that kind of category, like parking lots and that, would have to come up in front of this and become a question of, is that a valid use for land? Does that seem right?
Yeah, I guess that's what I'm saying, is like, doing it piecemeal doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Okay. I see.
I feel like we could, while we're addressing this one thing, we could deal with some other things too. And I'm also inclined to, because most of these, there are some exceptions, but a lot of these, I think especially in our town, are small businesses run by, local residents, people that live here, and I think, I'm sort of in favor of helping small businesses when we can. So I'm inclined to try to find something that addresses the very real concerns that these are bringing up, but also, leaves room for the success of these local business people. So, I think, a lot of the mechanisms that other jurisdictions have brought and that Melissa mentioned tonight, I think are really great. If we try to make them a little bit more intensive development, that instead of a sprawling, really land consumptive project, I think maybe everybody can win in that situation. Especially because, if these are filling up, that means people want them. And if people want them, they're going to be somewhere. I don't know, it seems like a little bit of throwing the baby out with the bathwater if we just, and it doesn't seem like anyone here is really in favor of an outright ban, so I guess maybe I'm preaching to the choir at this point. How do you all feel about maybe different standards for commercial and industrial? Would you like to get it out of commercial entirely, or allow it in commercial with some conditions?
So, Tel, just to clarify, I think I am in favor of a moratorium to allow more study, to see where we want to potentially allow them. But I just wanted to clarify that. As far as where you would allow them, in commercial, I think that the only way you would allow them is as a component of something mixed use with more commercial activity.
Portland's restricted storage units on the commercial sites.
The industrial property, I'm worried about getting eaten up because of one of the things Mike said, which I agree with. If they become more regulated or restricted elsewhere, water will find a level or the lowest point, of entry. And so we could fill up to that. I think they're a better accessory use than the primary use of property, for sure.
I kind of like the idea of setting a limit as to how many there are, like Richfield did, 8.32 square feet per resident, or whatever we decide that should be, which kind of looks like we'd be putting a stop to it for a while until the city grows. But I kind of like setting a standard on there as to how much we'd like to have in the city, because certainly we have to have some. As they begin to build houses that are smaller and smaller, you can't store everything that you have in your house, and so you need an extra storage unit. I can't, there's things that I can't park in my front yard in my HOA, and if I want one of those, then I have to have a storage unit to put it in, or keep it in my garage.
Which then that wouldn't fall under the mixed-use one, because you'd have to take it to the second or third floor.
Well, that'd be fun.
Yeah, and that's something we haven't addressed yet is, how do we want to treat, RV and boat storage?
I think we treat them separately.
Okay, because I believe Ridgefield said no outdoor storage.
That's what I just read.
So it's all indoor, which I like that as well, because it seems like the, indoor access to units is a little bit more intensive and space efficient instead of having.
We would also have to define what indoor is. If you have pole-supported roof, is that indoor? Right, we'd have to make some determination of what indoor means.
Well, it would be all indoor housing, the interior doors.
I was talking about the RVs and boats, but.
Okay.
How's this feeling for guidance? Are we, feel like we're getting there? You have some directions?
Yeah, good discussions.
Okay.
I like that design, and I like the idea of commercial on the bottom floor.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about architectural standards, having
I agree with
glass?
that wholeheartedly.
I do.
At least 2
Yes.
stories, I mean.
Just
Yeah.
At
because.
least 2 stories.
Well, having more like of the walls be glass or have some other
I do.
interest like that.
And in our commercial zone, we do have design standards, so maybe we'll do a quick refresher on those.
Okay.
Because, for example, you can substitute wall treatments, like what you see on the left, would substitute for the glass standard in our current standards.
And when we looked at the map, I noticed that almost all of our mini storage is in industrial, and I wonder if that is because of the design standards in our C2 zone. It would just be harder and maybe more expensive to build your mini storage in C2, having to have glass and architectural and blank wall treatments and setbacks and more landscaping and all of these things.
Okay, and we don't have any design standards at all in industrial?
Comparatively, very little.
Clark County has something in Highway 99, which was traditionally kind of a uglier part, right, with older architecture. And so new stuff there has to have these blank wall treatments, such as you're seeing there, and transparency requirements, which are glass requirements. So you could always steal, plagiarize some of those standards if you like.
I like the glass use.
I do too.
Yeah, they seem to have put all the glass in the front section, and the whole back doesn't even have to have it.
Okay.
I also like the fact that they're not, Ridgefield is not lining the freeway with them.
Oh, but so you like the visibility from
Yes.
the highway?
Yeah, I don't like having them
Or
line the freeway.
back up to it and bring in tall
Okay.
stuff, because they're super tall.
Yeah. Sorry.
And they don't like.
So do we have any that are visible from the highway right now? I can't
There's
remember.
one in Hazeldale. U-Haul
Rabbit
just
Woodland.
built one. Oh, I don't remember.
Yeah, I don't think there are any.
Two of them, right on the freeway.
I don't think there's
Oh,
any
up
glass.
towards Calamity.
No.
I don't think there's
Yeah.
any glass in that one.
No.
On
No,
the
I think
west
that's
side,
more
yeah,
of
I
a
see
storage
that.
container
Yeah.
thing.
So,
That's one that was
I'm-
built a while ago.
How about the, before we move on, I don't know if we're ready to move on, but before we move on, Travis mentioned the sort of storage container deal, and that seems, do we want to address that as well?
I see.
I don't know. Is that going to be easy for us to address in code?
On our retooling our code list is, I would like the planning commission to consider a prohibition on storage containers in the city. Whether they're on-site storage or in people's backyards or in their side yards or their front yards.
I hate driving through a neighborhood and seeing one of those pods parked in there.
I think this is a whole different deal.
They're just to pick up and go.
Yeah,
So
I think
if it's a pod-like business where they rent you the pods, that's still storage. We could still keep that under the umbrella of
But
storage.
these are like shipping containers you're talking
Right.
about, right? Like
Yes.
Yeah.
truck trailers.
So Janice pointed out that behind that middle flag is a roll-up door. So for example, that side,
loading dock?
for all I know, inside that storage, it might be pods stacked to the 4th floor.
That's very true.
Yeah, so it's not necessarily that they could be prohibited as part of a storage unit, but outside, and you see them, actually, the map was missing one storage facility, and that's south of Horseshoe Lake at the White's Trucking site. They are starting to accumulate big storage containers,
Yeah.
and it is an ongoing
It
business.
is an
and
eyesore.
Woodland's already in the container storage business.
Okay.
It's just
All right, so maybe we should address that separately.
Now, if we said like those rail units, because one of the things is some cities, because we do have kind of like a waterfront, and some cities use those rail cars and put little stores in them along the waterfront. If we had prohibited rail car storage, that would not be that, would it?
Yeah, I agree. If they're using it as a structure, I think we could write our code to do it differently.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
container parks are kind of cool.
Okay.
I've seen them made into tiny homes as well. I'm sure
Yeah.
you've seen that
It's
also, and they don't
super
look that
They're
bad.
advocating a lot of
But-
veteran programs with that.
But they're not just taking a storage unit and locking a human being inside of it and calling it a tiny home.
Exactly. I was going to ask about that.
All right, so, I don't know, anybody, I feel like we're kind of winding down on this.
Yeah.
Anybody have any last thoughts? You feel like you...
I'm wondering about design standards, if I can quiz you.
Please.
Do you feel differently about design standards in commercial and industrial zone? Do you like
I do,
adopting
but-
different design standards?
I do, I would like design standards in both,
So would I.
but
I
maybe
think
not
it's
the
less
same.
complicated to have the same standards for both.
Mm.
We want the same for both.
Sure.
I think that we could do one design standard to apply to them both, couldn't we?
No, because if you put commercial buildings underneath it, you can do that in industrial.
Well, they wouldn't be able to do the commercial buildings. They wouldn't be able to do uses that aren't allowed in the industrial area, in the industrial areas. Commercial, you could package with other commercially approved uses, and that's what I think the commercial use below, storage above idea was about. But industrial, that's just, it's an industrial type use. If you're going to allow it anywhere, you want to allow it in industrial. But I think if you made the made the design standards more appealing. At least it doesn't look as bad. You still have the job issue, which is my main hang-up, so.
I think that's a big issue.
This is a big issue, yeah. Could we do, so, a couple of jurisdictions had, height requirements, two-story requirements. Could you do a floor area ratio instead of that? Would that work better?
A what ratio?
A floor area
Floor
ratio?
area.
Oh.
Or is that just clumsy and more complicated than it needs to be?
So it is, I don't know enough about the market to know whether that would just act as a prohibition, because if you have to do a 6-story storage facility, the construction cost would be prohibitive, therefore it's a
Sure, so we
de
wouldn't go that
facto
high,
moratorium.
but we could say.
If we did 3, would that be a prohibition?
Yeah.
5-minute break. All right.
Application for this. This came up because the entire planning commission, except for the chair, was not on the planning commission when this was discussed. And the actual policy is that we will review this every year, and since none of you were here, because it's been almost 2 years since we discussed this, that we felt that it should come back and you should be reacquainted with it. And whether there are specific issues like attendance that need to be added to the policy.
Okay. Yeah, so I think it is important to dig into our procedures once a year, and that's why last time around we put that in the procedures, that we should at least look at it. Doesn't necessarily mean we have to make big changes or any changes at all. Just means we look at it and determine if we need to make changes. I believe, my memory is hazy on this, but I believe before the last revision that we did have an attendance requirement. I don't remember what the details were. I think that could be useful to put that back in, not, in an effort to be like punitive to anybody, because we're all volunteers here, and this is, we're not compensated for this, and I think everybody really appreciates all of you on the commission putting in time. I think more, my interest in maybe putting that back in is just to ensure that there's good communication, because, conflicts of schedule come up, and things that aren't predictable happen, and that's just a fact of life. But if, like last month, it's a perfect storm, and that happens for too many people at once, then a lot of work that city staff has put in is, I won't say it's wasted, but we don't make progress that we could have otherwise. So that's the one thing I'm thinking about on our procedures. I don't know if anybody else has any other thoughts.
You just want to add something that just verbally encourages communication and
I think so, yeah. I think at the very
without
least.
some sort of punitive.
Yeah, I think maybe, we could say if it becomes I don't know, if there's like an egregious pattern of just totally blowing off meetings without telling anybody, then maybe.
Well, the city council has something written in there, don't they, about attendance requirements?
I'm sorry, Mike, I couldn't hear.
City council has some attendance requirements, don't they? And I don't know what they are, but it's like, you can't miss more than 2 or 3 meetings a year without.
So we can borrow those and start as a starting place, that makes sense?
Yeah, yeah, and I think, that seems like a good starting place. And for me, I think it's mostly, most important to, like, if we can't make it for whatever reason, let staff know, so that we can plan around that if it happens. Again, emergencies happen, and that's not, we're not really talking about that in this situation, so. I don't know, does that feel like enough? Did anybody else look through the procedures and
I did, it
have any
didn't say
thoughts?
anything on it.
you have any other?
Thing that you all think that we ought to be paying a special attention to?
The other biggest issue last time was appearance of fairness and ex parte communication and conflicts of interest. Because there used to be a description of how you felt you should act, and then through the conversation, we just simply went to, you're responsible for complying with the state law. That is fundamentally true, but you should have kind of a layman's explanation of, you expect each other to declare if you have conflicts of interest. Just so you understand what the law says beyond just saying, because you're going to have to whip the law out every meeting and review it, because I'm not sure whether what you just said is a conflict with the RCW or not.
I don't know, do you still have a copy of the old version anywhere?
I'm sure we have. I'm sure we will find one.
Maybe try and dig that up, and again, I think the old language might be at least a place to start, because I agree. I mean, the last time we did this, it got to be a real contentious deal, because we couldn't really agree on language, and that's why we just
I think it
said
would
by
be hard
reference.
to define conflict of interest. I think it would be tough to do.
The language that was in there before was fairly straightforward, and it wasn't trying to define conflict of interest. It was mostly about the appearance of fairness.
Is the definition of conflict of interest?
Well-
Your neighbor will know it when he sees it. Right.
Well, it is defined in state law.
And if I remember correctly, the old procedure was simply that you are expected to declare and be transparent if there's a conflict of interest. Because the law doesn't actually say you have to excuse yourself, it just says you have to declare so that it can be known, so that if somebody who's aggrieved will know that there's a potential conflict. Or they can ask you to excuse yourself. That's when the law kicks in, but we don't even say that in our policies, we don't even say that you have to declare those problems. You just have to follow the law, which says you have to declare those problems. But
Yeah, I think I'd like to throw that back in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that needs to be in there.
I think it sounds right.
This is ignorant speaking, but it seems like in the old days, the appearance was that people got on the planning commission when they had property, they want to make sure it gets zoned properly. So they stay on long enough to get their property taken care of, and otherwise, what's the use of being on a planning commission?
At least one or two commissioners that I've served with, I think that was roughly their story.
I'm not advocating for this to be added for language at all, but just as a general guideline, it's not what it is, it's what it looks like. I mean, that's just as a general guideline.
Yeah, and I think that's what the appearance of fairness part is, attempting to address it anyway. Does that feel like enough to go on?
And part of it is from a citizen's point of view, they should be able to look at this and understand. They shouldn't have to get a lawyer to explain to them whether that was a problem or not.
Yeah, and, Washington code is not particularly human readable. So, yeah, I agree that that would be worth throwing back in there. And if anybody else, in the meantime, thinks of some language they'd like to see in there that they dislike, then we'll bring it to a future meeting. Does everybody feel all right moving on?
Hey, we're picking up steam.
Woohoo, look at that.
All right. Okay. Next up, we have county pre-app update. Some fantastic news, I'm sure. All our dreams coming true out there. The county's agreed to all our stipulations and more.
Yes, they have rolled over and become compliant. We
Oh.
always hope. Sorry, this is...
I thought your first pre-app was a self-storage facility for a minute. That's what I thought. You showed that screen, I'm like, oh, there you go.
There we go.
So, the reason why this has come up, because out of the blue, we seem to have gotten several projects that came onto our radar, and the county routed to us to comment. And beyond the little tiny nickel and dime stuff, they had 3 particular issues that, right in a row, that caught our attention. So we let the city council and the mayor aware that this was happening because it's relevant to our planning future. And so the 3 projects we're going to talk about are identified. One of them is up by the Lewis River Golf Course. It's 5 miles upriver. There's one right on the urban, or the city limits in the urban growth boundary, and the other one is south of town in the area that we were considering for urban growth expansion, and they had requested a comp plan change in 2018. So we'll just go over these real quick to give you a heads up. In your packet is the application material that the county asked us to review, and then also the letter that staff prepared for the pre-application conferences and to give to planning staff at Cowlitz County. So you'll see both the request and the city's response in that packet. So real quick, this is the one that is across the street from the intermediate school at the north end of town. It's actually the Lewis River RV and mini storage, and they are, what you see in this picture is,
Oh, yes.
so the actual colors represents the city limits comes down, and the green is within the city. The county, currently this is all unzoned, and our comprehensive, or their comprehensive plan, or sorry, this is urban residential zoning, or comp plan, I think that actually is. No, it's zoning. And this is unzoned. In our comprehensive plan, these properties are commercially comprehensive plan designation, and this is residential comp plan designation, so this zoning is consistent with our urban growth boundary, or our urban growth designation, but they are requesting to take these two properties from unzoned to an industrial zoning, and be to commercial, not industrial. And so it's not that we're against them going from unzoned designation to a urban zoning or a urban type zoning. We just think they should go to commercial, not industrial. So we're not opposing it, it's just the wrong zone.
So I don't feel strongly either way because I'm not educated on why you think that way, but why would you rather be commercial than light industrial?
Because under our comprehensive plan, when they annex to the city, we would give them a commercial zone. So it seems like bait and switch for them to go to unzoned to industrial and then commercial after they've already developed.
Okay, so is it commercial to the south in our city limits?
So it's residential to the south.
So it'd just
Residential
be-
on all sides.
So it'd just be an island of commercial surrounded by residential?
It is, and it currently is comp planned that way. My assumption
Oh,
was,
okay,
is when
okay.
we adopted our comp plan, we assigned it commercial because it actually is commercial.
Because of the existing commercial activity is the only
Yes.
reason? Okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
And so upon further investigation, and we've been having discussions with the consultant for this property owner, our comment was, well, it's going to cost you more money to get a county zoning change and then do a site plan. It's actually cheaper for you to annex into the city and just go through the city ordinance, because we updated our ordinance. This clearly would meet a lot of the criteria we adopted. Why don't you just annex to the city and we'll give you commercial zoning and approve what you want to do?
So that
You
they're
just
not
have
a
to go through the-
non-conforming use.
So they're
basically.
considering that, but, you know, it's that fundamental argument, why would you come into the city and pay taxes when you can get everything for free and be in the county and not have to pay city taxes? So,
What are they?
What's the property
Yeah, what
on
are they
the river?
proposing to use?
so they are actually, so they want to preserve their non-conforming rights to continue as a storage facility when they annex.
That's
And I
right.
explained to them, when you annex into the city, you get non-conforming rights, and we wouldn't yank those out from you because we have code that covers that. They weren't necessarily clear on that. But they're also potentially looking at adding a cell tower. And from, when you look at our criteria, it is underserved, and our preference is industrial, then our second choice is commercial, and then our lowest choice is residential. So this is a site that actually is not adjacent to residential zoning. It's not actually, or it would be commercial, it's underserved, there's no co-location opportunities in the area, so it actually meets the criteria without having actually reviewed the application. It looks like it would be
I can't see that far. Are those like 4 parcels that abut the river there between the existing storage? Are those all residentially developed?
So,
think two
these
of them are
ones
not yet
here
developed.
are residential, and
Are
they're
they floodplain or something?
currently in
Is
the
that why
county.
They're
The
not.
two on the,
Those two
down
are,
there.
and then this one
And
has
these
a-
ones are in the shoreline of the Lewis River,
that's the-
and, but they are not floodplain.
They're not, okay, so they could be
Yeah, they're on
developed
a-
with
there's a-
shoreline approval.
Yeah.
There's a dike all along there. It's all on river.
So where would they put the cell tower down there on those lots that are?
So I think they were looking like in this corner, is
Oh,
the
okay,
impression that I
okay.
got, or sorry, in this corner here.
That could probably help cell reception a whole lot in that area, because it's pretty bad.
I would
And
prefer
give the bald
to,
eagles a place to nest.
We could actually talk on the phone on the golf course.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to locate it, I'd prefer it was within the boundaries of the storage facility, right? I mean,
Yeah. Which is why we're encouraging them, just come into the city, and then we could review it with our ordinance, because I trust our ordinance more than I trust the county, anything.
so Travis, you said that they wanted, that you offered, or that you explained that you'd be, that you'd explain that you'd be preserving their non-conforming rights. Are they an allowed use in the commercial you'd be giving them? Or would they still be, or would they be a non-conforming use in the commercial?
Well,
So that way, if it burns to the
It
ground.
currently is a permitted use, but if we change it to prohibit in the future and it burns down, then the question is. But my comment was, well, we'll just make it part of the annexation agreement that, in this case, we recognize that you have non-conforming rights to replace.
Yeah, so if it's non-conforming and it burns down, then you can't rebuild it? Is that what the
In
traditional
some
sense?
circumstances, you cannot.
Okay.
It depends upon the use and your non-conforming rights, but generally, there is a limit to how much a structure can be damaged before you need to bring it up to current code, and
Also, if we were to add design standards to storage units and that was to burn down, the only way they'd be able to rebuild it could be
Current code.
to meet our design standards,
Okay.
which could be a lot more costly than simply replacing what they have.
Right.
So that-
So, you know, however it ends up getting zoned, if it's just, it's like surrounded by
Residential.
residential uses, I don't know, I guess I don't have any fundamental objection to putting a commercial spot in residential. Seems a little strange.
It would also increase the square footage per city resident.
Sure.
Just because it's outside the city, now it's going to come inside, but
That's true.
So is that parcel north of those long storage buildings, is that developed commercially right now?
it
That,
is.
yeah.
It's
It
a
is?
trucking company,
Oh,
right?
okay. I was thinking if we were to annex it and then it was to develop, we would benefit from traffic impact fees, but if it's already developed,
I think that's why our comp plan shows it as pink.
just because it's already been it's
Yeah.
already being used that way.
So, okay, never mind.
is there a question on the table, or are we just discussing?
No,
or
so I'm just giving you a heads up.
Okay.
So the next one that's come in, this is the one that's south of town, so this is Wayland here, and this is Pekin. So the storage facility that we were talking about is right here. Walt's Meat is just off the top of this map to the north, and this is the Donald Farm
The same thing that was before us last summer.
for the comprehensive plan amendment.
But larger lots.
And so this area is currently designated as small holding, which is a 5-acre minimum, and there's no zoning on it, so it's unzoned. And then they are requesting to go to a suburban zoning, which, depending on whether there's water and sewer, urban services available, project is upriver. This is the Lewis River. I guess they're going to request, again, a small holding to suburban comp plan change. And they're looking at about 260 units of tiny homes, cottage homes, and RV pads. So it would
And
be...
the golf course will be gone? Or
No.
No,
So
it's going around
here's
it.
the golf course, and you can see that there's some along the river, and so it's very specific where they're trying to wedge in some houses along the fairways and that. So from our point of view, the missing middle that we're talking about in housing size and price, this is the kind of stuff that we would like communities to
That's going to be
encourage.
affordable on the golf course?
It just may not be where we want it because, so the issues that we raised, again, are traffic, schools, parks, and the other issue that we threw out here, and that is the number of septic systems upriver of our water intake, the source of the city's water, is a concern because maintenance on septic systems is not always guaranteed. So.
And this
so-
is on the property that belongs to Statings as part of the golf course or adjacent to the golf course, or?
I believe there are multiple owners, and I'm not sure exactly who they are because we wrote our comments to the county, and they're mostly based upon the fact that we would like the county to start mitigating for school
Okay.
and traffic
Okay.
impacts because they haven't historically done so.
Those ones that are along the river there at
How
the...
deep are those lots along the river, roughly?
I don't know for sure.
Because there's a mandatory setback for residential development along, in the shoreline code, right?
And at this point, they are just doing the comprehensive plan amendment. I don't know that they've submitted any applications.
There's probably enough room pretty easily for tiny homes or cottage homes, because you wouldn't want to build a mansion right there unless you were sitting there right on the river.
So a concern I have, you know, just as far as development along the shoreline, is if you zone or you change the comp plan on a strip that's only 75 feet back from the ordinary high water mark, aren't you creating you're creating a self-created hardship when you come in and want to build on those lots, which I don't believe the shoreline code would allow, right?
This is far outside our UGA. This is miles outside.
But as far as comments go, it's
Yeah.
something you
Yeah.
could add.
Yeah, that is good. I didn't think of that, but that's a really
That's
good point.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And when the actual application comes to us to review, I'll try and remember to put that in there. But ultimately, my position has been, we are trying to point out that the county needs to do better planning because they are drowning us in traffic and kids and not paying their fair share.
So we're talking about all the way over, almost to the mobile home park there, up on the upper left?
I think even the mobile home park would be redeveloped.
Okay.
Well, it's the Echo Store, the old Echo Store?
I think there's a big wetland between the Echo
Yeah.
store and that.
Yeah.
You mean the RV park, right?
I believe there's, I mean, I'm a
That's
golfer, I've
that,
gone out.
yeah. Over, yeah.
I think there's a wetland in the middle of
There
it.
definitely is, yeah.
But there's also a mobile home park off Nemi Road, I think, somewhere like
Well,
in
it's
there.
it's right north of Lewis on Old Lewis River Road.
And you'll notice
yeah,
it
right
is
there.
on both
Yeah.
sides of the highway, and it's on both sides of the golf course and separate sides of the clubhouse, so it's a large area that they're looking at, and it might be
Looking at
multiple
condos?
developments, or
What are
it
they
might be
looking
individual developments. At this point, they're looking at comp plan.
So that would also be the half-acre lots that the suburban, is that?
Yes, if they have proper services. So what it says is, if it's individual wells and septics, it's 2 acres. If you have water, but it's on-site septic, I think it's 1. If it's, so there's a sliding scale depending on how suburban it is versus rural big lots, or 5-acre small holding.
Would this, yeah. I'm warming up to the idea of just putting stop signs at city limits on every road that comes into town.
The point
I don't know
that-
if the state would
The
care for
point
that.
that came up in the conversation for exit 21 is we're analyzing the existing conditions and we're trying to project what future growth is going to be. And what we know for sure is under our comprehensive plan, we expect to grow to over 9,000 people. We expect the jobs of a fully developed industrial and commercial zones, and so we could model that. And then the consultant started saying, well, what's going to happen upriver, what's going to happen downriver? And the answer is, well, it's ag and it's 5 acres, so nothing's going to happen. And upriver, it's fully developed and it's all 5 acre minimum, so nothing's going to happen. And then literally like the week after we have our meeting and confirm that, it's such a black box, we don't know what to say. All of a sudden, we have 500 additional homes being considered, and if the county approves them, that's like 30% of the capacity that we've built into that intersection. And so they want us to fix the problem so that they can consume all of that capacity.
Right, at which point, okay, so even us, so, I know it was leftover money that was used, but at some point, we're spending city money to pay consultants to solve the county's problem, which just does not sit right with me. And, maybe there's something to be said for us having, a seat at the head of that table, but ultimately, Woodland is not creating the traffic issue. That is the county, and whatever the city does to solve it, we're solving it for people who aren't, our ratepayers, they aren't our constituents, they aren't.
Yes, and this issue came up during the comprehensive plan, and I've fallen into the role of publicly shaming them, being everybody who doesn't live within the city, because they're the taxpayers who pay me. My job is to look out for them.
Right.
We work for the taxpayers, so I'm publicly shaming everybody who's not part of the we.
Okay, all right. You're doing a great job.
Except for stop signs on the street.
Stop signs, yeah. Looking at stop signs, maybe like a gate, a toll gate?
Toll gate, there we go. With the toll bridges
Let's look into that, if you can. Any more on the county trying to make our lives difficult? Moving on. So retooling our code. I think there's some more exciting stuff here.
So this always hangs out on your agenda for the better part of 2 years now. The big issue that we wanted to give you an update is we got a grant from the Department of Ecology. They are giving us some money to update our shoreline program. It's supposed to be done by 2022. So it's going to the front of the line because we got the grant. The good news is it's the 8-year update for the 2012 plan, which was adopted in 2017. So it's only 2 years old, but the 8-year update is due. But since we got the grant, so it should be relatively easy because the Department of Commerce approved the shoreline program we updated a couple of years ago. So we'll put it out to the public. We'll find out whether there are any significant changes or problems that need to be fixed. But it may just be more of a check-in with the public to make sure that they're comfortable that the decisions were made a couple of years ago. But that's something that's going to be on your work plan, whether you would really wanted to engage in it or not. But
Kind of a little curveball here, but would, creating a shoreline zone fall under that sort of thing? Like if we wanted to do that, a different zone, or is this just about?
we could discuss this.
Okay.
Yep. So we have a floodway zone, but,
You have a floodway zone?
so we have a floodway zone.
You have allowed uses in the floodway?
Well, we have a floodway zone map. What's actually allowed in that zone, I've never actually had to read it with a
I think-
fine-tooth comb, because it really doesn't say that you can do much down there. Floodplains can't be
Yeah, I
developed,
think
so.
it's like impervious paths, pervious paths, and
Anything
like
you
ball fields or something.
can't lower the flood storage by
Yeah.
adding any fill. or
Yeah,
anything
no
like
net
that.
loss.
You
So
know-
all of that is in there, and we can revisit it and see whether there was any glaring errors from a couple of years ago, but.
Yeah. Okay, I just, and that comes from me just kind of feeling like we're squandering our waterfront.
So just, I don't want to go off into the weeds, but I am one of those planners that look at shoreline permits for Clark County. And I haven't gone through our shoreline code, but ecology has to approve them, so I'm assuming they're fairly similar.
And
Right. So Shoreline has its own allowed uses, almost like it's its own zone already. And
Sure.
so it does have some of that.
Yeah, and we dug into that with the last comp plan.
Yeah.
Oregon has all the houseboats, Washington has none.
And the 2017 update, it was actually part of a grant project that was county-wide, and each jurisdiction kind of took that framework and tweaked it as they needed to. So we are pretty consistent with the county plan, which means that if we ever expand our urban growth boundary and annex something, say like on the south side of Horseshoe Lake, it's not that much of a change for the actual property owners because they started out with the same bare bones. The second item there is we've also applied for a $50,000 housing action plan grant, which basically we've set the grant up to allow staff to do a housing analysis of the market that we were kind of started to touch on in 2018, and then figure out what our buildable land is left over, and then immediately move into updating our accessory dwelling ordinances and reviewing our zoning code and getting the state to actually pay for us to do some of the retooling our code stuff that's already on our list. We already know we want to do, only now we can use state money instead of taxpayer money, or city taxpayer money. So if you still have a copy of the Retooling Our Code list, if you see anything on there that's even remotely attached to housing discussion, we will try and pull it under that umbrella and quickly get it to the front of the line and fix it all at the same time, once you have kind of the true data and analysis to support your decision making.
Excellent. When, do you know when you'll hear back on that?
So I think the deadline for application is February 28th, if I remember correctly, and then they would notify us in March, they said.
Okay, so pretty quick turnaround.
Yep.
Turnaround, rather.
So our proposed schedule was trying to get it done as much as we could before the end of the year, because 2021 is when we kind of committed to looking at the comp plan again.
Okay.
So this year is going to be a busy year because we've got Exit 21, potentially Housing Action Plan, potential Shoreline. We're doing the rate study for our utilities. We're doing our industrial area service study. So there's a lot going on. So all of the complaints we heard in 2018 about not being ready to discuss urban growth area expansion, it may be too late by then, but we are getting prepared, and that's why we're making noise about planning decisions at the county.
Do you expect to hear back from the county on those letters you sent?
So we sent the letters, and we attended both of the pre-application conferences. The first one, Melissa attended for the one adjacent to the city, the industrial request, and their consultant came in to talk to us, and we're trying to convince them annexed to the city, it might be more efficient. The second one for the these guys are bad guys because it's bait and switch. And my immediate response was no. Issue of the economics, half acres is not what they want to do, but it's what we left them with. And so they said, if you guys can give us water and sewer, we'll go higher densities, consume less land, go back to our master plan of open space, and
So
they're still open to that.
They're still willing to play ball with us then.
But
They do.
that's
Okay.
entirely a lot more units also, though, right? I mean,
Potentially. Now, the thing is that we made the argument when we were talking about scenario 6 of master planning the bottoms. If we master plan that site that they're looking at, it's hard to master plan a single site. We might get some, on-site open space. We might get, a corner of commercial. But really what we should be looking at is the bottoms so that the port can address industrial, and Aho might be able to be part of that residential, but the ag needs its space preserved for the future and recreation out on the river. That is true master planning, as opposed to master planning a single project isn't really master planning.
So I'd kind of like to take this opportunity to periodically plug incremental development
Oh, yes, and I'm sorry, where I was going with that is, we need to get the county to recognize a larger urban growth boundary in their plan, so that we can do our analysis in 2021, and if it says we need 50 acres, then it's 50 acres, and they have to wait for 5 more years, 2 more years, till we update our comp plan. Yeah, just because the urban growth boundary in the county expands, we still have to justify under GMA, and we might take 10 years to get to 250 units on the bottom versus Cowles County can just do it because they want to, because they have no GMA constraints. So, sorry, does that answer your question? 'Cause I think that's where you were going,
I think
right?
that does go some way towards it. Just like the idea of just typical, suburban style subdivision where you just plop down at a finished state instead of just letting things develop naturally is, I think it's a recipe that's,
Yeah.
like already, I believe, on the east side of town, that's already coming back to bite us, because we have, and those are relatively small developments, but all the houses and roads were built at once, and now they're all falling apart at once.
And we face this going north up Green Mountain Road, is there's a lot of 2 and 5 acre hurdles that we will never get past, so our expansion into the hills is pretty much impossible because of county actions.
And also, this is only maybe tangentially related, but I'd like us to see more standards about street connectivity, so we have, basically I want to abolish cul-de-sacs. I don't think we need those anymore in the city, so something I'd kind of like to look into, especially if we're, plotting out big growth like this stuff.
So that's really our retooling our code is more of an update of stuff that's going to be forced upon you rather than.
Okay. Do we want to talk about C through F here, or?
Sorry?
The next, so ADUs and PERDs and sign codes and.
So my guess is like the sign code and stuff like that, it's just going to slip down the list because if we have the grant money, we'll be on a timeline and have to proceed.
Okay.
Now, batch 2, I wonder, should we just, next time we have a hearing, because we're already going to do public notice and all of this, we should do a miscellaneous batch? Do you think of spelling and grammar and then perhaps the RV 90 days occupancy?
That works for me,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't have any
We can
problems
do
with that.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think, stuff like that's kind of a
Okay.
bonus. We can just do it without thinking about it too much. So.
With batch 1, we really kind of forced that on you because we wanted you to get one under your belt so you're comfortable. And we were hoping for batch 2, you would get to pick what you wanted to talk about, but Melissa's right. We can still fix a lot of stuff and force the list on you, but we still suggest stuff.
Yeah. Cool. All right, well, thank you for all of that, then. Anybody have any questions before we move on? Any remaining staff reports?
So, one of the issues that was brought up previously by Commissioner Blaufus is when you guys make recommendations that kind of goes off into the ether and we never come back and give you an update. So we wanted to quickly circle back on some of the issues you had brought up previously. The first one there is, notes, okay. The first one there is having to do with the enforcement case discussion when we were talking about the code enforcement portion of the Retooling Our Code Batch 1. That was Ordinance 1448. It was adopted on February 3rd and went into effect on February 8th. So the new code section that you guys had recommended, the council had gone ahead and they agreed with your recommendations except for changing the definition of nuisance. They said the state definition has been tested in court, and they were more comfortable just leaving that one the way it was. But they agreed in eliminating the civil penalty and just going, or criminal penalty and just leaving it as a civil issue. And then the other one they agreed upon. So that's gone into effect. Also, the Ordinance 1447 is all of the other small code changes that went into effect on the same date. So they made all of those changes that you recommended without any changes on that. So the second one down here is the historical appeal information. So one of the discussions that came up, and that was how many appeals on code enforcement issues had we encountered. And we went back, and actually there have only been a total of 13 total appeals since 1974. So the appeal thing that we were worried about, is it fair or not, basically has never happened. The appeals, two of them were permit decisions building permit decisions in 1974 and 75. There were 4 SEPA appeals, 2005, 2 in 2006, and 1 in 2014. But they were all applicant or neighbor appeals of determinations of non-significance. And so it was...
These weren't code enforcement at all.
So none of them were code enforcement, yes. And then 3 of them were filed but withdrawn by the applicant, 77, 2007, 2018. So the city's history of appeals, there is not a lot of past history of that might influence. And really that was kind of just a feedback on something. Melissa went in and she added what some of our neighboring cities do. So if you wanted to look up some additional information, Melissa found some other jurisdictions to compare ourselves to. Also, the cost of the appeal came up, and that's kind of the third item down below. And the issue that was raised was, do code enforcement penalties, do they accrue while the case is on hold during an appeal? And again, Commissioner Blaufus had raised the question of, is there case law that governs this? And the answer is there's no case law. But it really is a moot point, because the code you recommended said it goes on hold while the appeal is pending. And so, in effect, the law allows the city to decide whether it accrues or not, and we've decided that it will not accrue, and the city council agreed with you, so it's kind of a moot point. But the offshoot that came out of that, and that is if somebody does appeal and they win, appeals are expensive. If the city erred and staff shouldn't have filed liens or accrued penalties on the property, should they get their appeal fee back? Because they were right, the city staff was wrong all along. And the last of the update letters is you would discuss putting together a letter to recommend to city council that be refunded. And at the time, my comment was, if one of you feels strongly enough that you want to write a letter as a planning commission member, we'll pass it out to the other planning commission members. But we didn't feel that staff should draft that letter for you guys to sign off on. It really should be driven by you, and we'll disseminate it.
Yeah, and on that one, I think, I'm coming down on that side as well, I think.
And we had said we would
That's outside
distribute
our
it, and it
purview.
can go to the city council, but any one of you can go to a city council meeting and raise the exact same issue.
And I think that's the appropriate venue for raising that concern.
It's past my bedtime.
All right.
Good
Thanks,
night,
Bob.
all. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Bob.
Did you
Thanks for coming.
We'll see you
have
again.
any other comments on that one?
We're good?
Yep. Thank you, Bob.
Yes, good night, thank you.
Thank you.
Although we can't directly change it, I think that there is good reason maybe to ask for appeal fees to be refunded. And I wonder if we have so few appeals of code enforcement because it is prohibitively expensive, even, maybe it's rarely happened, but maybe that's because it's a major barrier. And I think I highlighted some cities in there that I thought had some interesting approaches. Again, not our decision, but I think there's some good information in there that you might use to start a letter if you wish to do so.
Okay. Yeah, no, I agree as well. I do think it's, I would like to see a change, and it is sort of outside of our general purview, so it's kind of...
And whether you do or not, we will bring this up the next time the fees are discussed. Does it make sense for us to just put it in the ordinance so that if it ever happens, there's no debate? So that's it for unfinished business.
Okay. Any more, you got any news for us on Exit 21, or is that pending the consultants? Looking through
I
reviews?
did. It is getting late. I could kind of breeze through it, though.
So I have a quick question on it.
Sure.
Is it on is that goofy little real action cartoon, that shows the two, is that online anywhere yet?
It will be.
It will be, it's just not yet. Okay.
It was a 20-minute loop, and I've asked Gilson to give us a 2-minute version, 2 to 6 minutes or so, so it'll be easy to share online. Let's see. I might skip this one.
Oh, that's what it is. Where the down for the charger.
There we go. I think I'll just breeze through a recap. If you want to see the presentation that was initially given to council, that one was on December 16th. We did an open house for Chamber. This was sort of our first open house, like a soft grand opening. That was on December 17th. And just 10 people came. We did a little survey. So some of this stuff I had prepared for last month, so it's getting a little bit out of date. But we kind of had quiz questions sort of on the survey, knowledge questions, and I thought it was interesting that most people knew that there were more accidents at traffic lights compared to roundabouts, and everybody that took the quiz guessed that accidents, of course, are less severe at roundabouts. So the safety stuck out to me. What else?
So, which council, 8 out of 8 knew that less dollars to build, is that roundabouts?
Yes, roundabouts. Yeah, and less to maintain. And at the first open house, we heard a lot of concern from trucking industry, and that is what led Tracy with Public Works to host a meeting especially for industry. Do you recall how many came to that meeting?
So there were 20 attendees at that meeting, and they represented all of the major trucking interests in the city of Woodland and a couple from outside of the area that do business with our trucking businesses.
The biggest concern we heard was about a particular kind of truck called a lowboy, and the really low riding, less clearance, and there's a need to design the roundabouts wide enough, so that's been really a ridiculous. And they've done all of their traffic modeling for the largest trucks that we have going through Woodland. Yeah.
Someone mentioned to me that there was a concern from one of the trucking people that trucks are tipping over as they go around the roundabouts. Have we had any accidents at the roundabouts at all?
So I don't know that we've had any of those type at ours. So my understanding is the 3 that we have at Exit 22 were built as part of the Walmart development, and the original design had higher internal curbs, so they were steeper, and they were redesigned and cut back to present less. And the problem is that truck tires are not made to do that kind of sidewall lifting motion at an angle, and that they tend to be harder on tires. But I don't know that we've had any tip overs here.
Okay.
But I think part of that might be a trucker education issue because they're designed to slow you down.
Yeah.
And
So
We
they're
don't
not
have any
des-
hydrants around the roundabouts, do we?
yeah.
They're designed not to crawl up on those low ones like we have now, or they're not designed
Or
to crawl up
the
over the curb?
original design had too steep, and
Yeah,
so the
yeah.
low boys were dragging and the truck
Okay.
tires were taking damage. So it was adjusted when they were repaved.
Would
I
they?
think that was, go on.
Would the roundabouts in this new one be similar in construction as the ones over on exit 22?
So actually, the current design, all of the ones at exit 22 are single lane with small diameters.
Yeah.
The ones that we are looking at are,
Two lanes.
the bigger one for the off-ramp is actually a 2-lane, which means it will handle more capacity and larger vehicles. The one on the on-ramp will be a single lane, but it would be a larger diameter, so the trucks can get around it. And that one, the particular problem is trucks with gangways coming out of Topper Industries. They have to cut the corner at Carl's Jr. and then come down and cut the corner in front of Napa and cut the corner in front of Gilligan's Island and cut the corner getting in the on-ramp or coming under I-5. So Kittleson and Associates is specifically taking a look at their numbers and figuring out whether there's issues. And that's probably more important for the traffic lights because the gangways stick out the back and they swing out and knock over the street light every time they go around the corner with a big load. Then that's all the more reason to look at roundabouts because you're not replacing your street light poles all the time. So that's the exact kind of feedback that Kittleson and Public Works got from that meeting.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you all so much for coming to that open house. I think it was really meaningful for the community to have Planning Commission there to chat with, and we had a good turnout from City Council as well. And that reminds me that we're going to be ordering name tags soon, probably next month. We have a new city logo, and I wanted to know, would you all like name tags for events like that so you can be identified as commission? And if so, would you like your first name only or first name and last name? So, Brian?
It'll definitely look more professional than a sticker stuck to it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want any extra cost. I mean, I could use a sticker.
They're $10. We can handle it.
Consider it a thank you for volunteering your time.
I'll wear it around Woodland all the time.
All the time. Grocery shopping.
They're going to try to give you a T-shirt before long, too.
Yeah.
A hat.
Yeah, I don't know.
First names.
Pat's going to be a
First name.
beanie with a propeller.
I feel like there you go. This feels like a first name kind of town.
Okay.
And first name Planning Commission underneath it, or just first name?
I think planning commission seems
Proper.
important.
Yeah.
Okay,
They don't
great,
think we work
thanks.
for the city.
Okay, so just some pictures from the open house. We had 80 attendees. I mean, we had 80 attendees. It was crammed in here, and I'm really glad a lot of people came. We got 60 comment forms. They're still trickling in because we have them available at the counter. I gave them out to Chamber of Commerce. And they're now online, and I'll show you that in a minute. And you all got a chance to see these firsthand, so I think I won't talk about them right now. Okay, so comment forms are online. And I'm going to switch over.
I believe
It will if I do this. Sorry, I'm seeing something different on my screen.
Might need to close or shrink the...
PowerPoint, is that? Oh, I
I
see.
thought we were
that.
going to have holograms by now.
I thought having that hyperlink was going to be nice.
Where's our flying cars?
Yeah. Could really use that flying car some days.
We have to close all of them.
Just wait
Is
around.
that the one we reviewed?
Right?
Get a hyperloop under Woodland.
Well, we're all jammed up now, I'm sure it's not gonna...
I think that if they started in the traffic schools in town, how to function in a roundabout would be easier.
Yeah.
Minimize it.
Well, I believe you, it's online.
Oh, there it is, now it's just this behind you, yeah.
There it is.
It'll catch up.
Okay, all right. Now, here's the information flyer, and that has the boards that we saw at the open house. So if you want to share this by email or direct people to it, then the comment form is online. And the video will be linked there as well.
Oh, great.
And I expect to get the video early next week, and I would like for you to wait to send out this comment form until early next week as well, because I have one last round of updates. But what I did was, this is one of our seamless documents, and I added text here so people that didn't go to the open house can read a little bit about what each of these displays mean. And so I put on the background, this one shows the level of service currently and what's projected in 2040 if we do no building. And this one shows the intersection concept and a little bit of text about what that's like, and the roundabout concept and a little bit more. Then they click here. Once they've read up on the project, this brings you to the comment form that they were provided at the open house. And you can click here, and all of the same forms that you saw state which their preferred concept is. They can write free form here, a little essay. And then when you click submit, it will be emailed to myself and Tracy, and we'll be able to just more easily collect more feedback from the community. So just wait until next week, and there'll be a couple revisions. I'll send you all of these links by email if that's an easy way for you to have it. Otherwise, check back on the website. If you see that the video's there, then you know that the form's free to send out. Good to go. I think that's it. Any other questions about? So the council will hear it again.
Oh,
do we have
yes.
a date?
So we're
Early
thinking
April?
it will be in, are we saying May now?
No, I think
So
early
it
April.
might be March. It might be March, might be April. It's going to depend on Kittleson being able to finish some of the modeling issues and actually produce a recommendation for the council. So we'll send out notice and email you when that's going to occur.
So this will be done by the end of 2020, is that the goal?
So the sooner we get the recommendations selected, we have money set aside by, I believe it's the Council of Governments, to start design work. So we could be hiring design as soon as May, June, and hopefully start construction if we can get money next year.
All right. Okay. Seems like a big if. All right. Thank you. Anything else?
The last one is just our fourth quarter report is on there, and I will show you one thing real quick. This is the standard quarterly report and the reports that we kind of give you every month. So that's kind of all the projects that we worked on in the last quarter. Here's our total permit breakdown and our residential breakdown. And the one thing I wanted to point out is I managed to get some updated information through a public records request. So our permit numbers on the residential side of the house have been falling for the past few years. So we issued a total of 18 residential units last year, and most of that was Sequoia Park, the condominiums. And so our permit numbers in 2016, we issued 53 new residential units. In 2017, that went up to 54. In 2018, that dropped in half to 27, and it's now at 18 for 2019, which is a third of the previous year. And part of that is a function of the easily developable properties, or the previously created lots are no longer on the market because they've been developed. We've had a couple two-lot short plats and a 4-lot short plat last year, but this year we might see a first subdivision in like 5 years come in. So the residential land, we're just not seeing that growth, which part of that might be a function of how much is being built in the county. Well, one of the things I got from the county is an updated amount of permits that were approved. So in 2006, when we approved 53 units, the county built 68 units. And in 2017, we built 54, they built 77. In 2018, we built 27, they built 106.
Oh, dear.
And last year, we built 18, and they built 87.
So is that countywide, Cowlitz countywide?
No, that's
Okay,
only
so that's-
in the Woodland zip code.
Okay,
so
okay. I
986.
was wondering, what, okay.
Whoa.
So we know as a matter of record that Clark County builds about one house for every one house we build. I mistakenly told the council that for every one we build, Cowlitz County builds one, but the reality is they build two or more for every one we build. So when we talk about drowning in somebody else's traffic and students, it's worse than I had even initially projected.
That is frustrating.
And that's before the 500 they're looking at now.
We're already ahead in 2020, though, interestingly, for single-family residential. I've already issued 4 permits. This
Oh,
is
just in 2
February.
months. Huh.
Yeah. So we're way ahead on that at this point, because there are some brand-new lots that are being developed.
And we actually have a couple, 2 pre-apps, or actually 2 short plat applications came in the door. They're infill lots on Club Road, 1 lot into 4 lots, so
Have you
we're
seen
starting
the
to see more.
accessory dwelling units? I know this is one of Tell's favorite
There's one under